Okay guys, welcome back. This is day 2 of the stroker build. Day 1 went really well. We got all the way down to the block, we got the block cleaned, but we start today with a biblical mess that wants to be tidied up before we get going. I'm not sure if you know, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this already, but Natalie's actually respraying a bumper for the Mitsubishi FTO that's sitting over there, and she's going to be using the garage as a sort of impromptu spray booth by sectioning parts of it off. In other words, I want to get my crap out of the way before we even get started. Let me just show you where we got to and all the rubbish that we've got lying around. So we've got wheels and all sorts of bits of plastic, an engine crane to get out the way, a radiator. There's the bumper on a nice little stand that we made for her. But it's a dumping ground in here. So a clean garage is going to give me a clean engine. I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to get everything I need to get out of the way for Natalie, and then I'm going to separate out all the things that I'm going to be reusing for the engine and all the things I'm not going to be reusing. I can then start to having a look at cleaning up the block and messing about with getting things prepared so we can start rebuilding the thing. We're on Tuesday now, 10 AM in the morning, rip roaring, rocking and righteous, mate. Okay guys, so here we go. We've got the block here completely stripped bare, even the oil jets are removed from the bottom of the cylinder bores. This bore I have tested to make sure it is steel linered, and therefore I'm going to give it a really quick and light hone with a honing tool just to clean off any of the carbon deposits that are at the top of the cylinders and to try and clean off a little bit of the skirts. I don't know if you can see down there, but at the very bottom of the skirts there's quite a lot of oil varnish down in there. I'm going to give it a liberal coating with WD-40 on all the inside of the bores. I'm literally just going to lick in and out of them real quick. And I don't really want to take any material off here, so you get the tool in, let it square up. That's probably enough, I reckon. Bit of a crosshatch pattern going. I'm no pro, but that's better than leaving it as it was, so I'm going to call it at that. I'm not going to go any further than that. I'm going to just clean off this surface a little bit. I've scraped all the old gasket material off, I've got the old dowels out. Right, I'm not going to mess with this anymore. I'm going to call this. I'm going to give it a degrease, mask it up, and then I'm going to give it a paint on the outside. So I'm not going to go any further than I have. I really don't want to take too much material off. Just a little update. I've lost my fucking head with my GoPro and smashed the adapter box up, which has just cost me 50 quid because I spent 20 minutes filming and the thing didn't record any sound again. So I'm seething with anger right now. But to let you know where we're at, the block is painted. If Natalie can pan down here, we're on her phone. This is it on the engine stand again, and it's completely naked as we stand at the moment. The gasket surface in the bottom needs to be cleaned up, and then we need to start assembling all the oil jets before we put the crank in. In the shot here that you can see are the Vanos, this bottom Vanos gasket and the rear main seal. I've actually used this copper spray gasket that I saw Alberto Big Bush using for a multi-layered steel head gasket. These are a kind of similar construction, although they're not multi-layered steel, but they're kind of covered with a rubberized coating, and these are the only two that I haven't bought new ones for. I don't really know why I didn't, I just didn't get to that point, and I got this in a package with some assembly lube at the same time, so I'm fairly happy that this has given these a little bit of something just to bite into the block with to stop them from leaking. So they're ready to go. I've had a bit of a shifty and a tidy up down below our feet here, which you can't see. Got some of the parts ready. So on the bench here we've got the the main caps, which are given a quick wipe down. We've got the oil pump. We have my wired oil pump nut. Now I did this myself because I didn't fancy buying an oil pump nut from Bimmerworld for $25 and then having it shipped to the UK. So if you can see that there, I've actually got a hole drilled through it, and luckily because of the nature of my work, I've taken this to work to make sure it's not cracked and there's no failures in it. It's actually been mag tested to make sure it's all perfectly sealed. Also on the bench you're going to see here the rear main seal housing, which I've cleaned up. That's ready to go back in the car. There's nothing wrong with that rear main seal. I actually put that in the car only a year ago when I was doing the auto to manual swap. I've given the harmonic damper, all the cam gears, all the sprockets, the oil chain, the oil pump a bit of a wipe down. That doesn't look particularly clean. I don't really care. It doesn't need to look spotless to do the job it needs to do. And then the only other thing that I've done in preparation to get the build ready is to separate out some of the bolts that I had laid on the table earlier on yesterday. First process in putting them back together is to put the little oil jet squirters back in, which go inside the block there and squirt oil up onto the underneath of the piston crown. So if you can, I don't know if you're going to be able to make this out, if you can focus right on that little ball, from what I can tell there's a little ball valve in there that stops the oil from flowing back down these. And what I've done is I've just got my air line and blown it on the back end. You can see the oil squirt out there, did you get that? Okay, so I've bought a set of Allen bits, but they're 1/2 inch drive, and this part of it's a bit fat to actually reach in and tighten these cap heads down. So I'm actually using here a T30 Torx bit, which basically is the same size, and they don't require a lot of torque, so I'm just going to run them in by hand with this, and then once they're in I will give them a little torque up. I believe that these torque up to about 22 Newton meters, which is basically hand tight. Okay, so now comes the most important part for me of doing this build, which is cleaning out the head bolt holes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill them up with solvent, and then I'm going to blow them out with compressed air upside down, and then I've actually got a tap so that I can, well, I've got a set of taps so I can re-tap every one of the cylinder head bolt holes. I want to make sure these are as clean as I can humanly make them before we, go to put the cylinder head on. Okay, so this is my M10 by 1.5 bottoming tap, which I'm just running down the threads just to clean them up. Now I'm quite surprised at how much material is actually coming out. A little bit of oil on it, as you can see, and it is pulling out. That's actually quite a clean one. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far. Let me just go all the way to the start. Okay, he's coming out. Just a little bit of material on him. The aim of the game is to try and get these holes as clean as I humanly can, like I said, so that when I put the head bolts in, I really don't have any risk of them pulling the threads back out. Basically want these to be like brand new threads if I can possibly do that. That's really light finger pressure on there, which is what I want. I want them to run all the way in until the torque point, basically, without any resistance. So when I come to torque them up, all the force is on the entire thread. That's gone in all the way by hand, and that's still got some metal in there. I'm going to give these another clean out with solvent after I've done this to get any swarf out of the holes. So the reason I'm going to these lengths is, being a 6-cylinder head, the head bolts have got quite a large amount of torque that goes on them. I have to torque them to 40 Newton meters, and then a 90-degree turn and another 90-degree turn, and every time I watch someone do that, it looks like a hell of a wump that they get when they get tightened up. There are lots of threads online where you can read about people having problems with these head bolts pulling out the threads in the block, and being an aluminium block, it is more susceptible to that sort of thing. I'm obviously super paranoid that I'm going to pull the threads out at the fucking worst point when I get to put the cylinder head back on, and then the block's basically toast. There's the next one. To be frank, if I pull one of the threads out of this block, I'm going to kick the block into touch, and I'm going to go and try and find myself an iron block M52B30 block if I can, which has far less chance of this sort of problem happening. But in the interim, this is what I've got to work with, and I'm trying to give it as much care and attention as I possibly can. It's one of those leave no stone unturned sort of things, give them a clean out with solvent, clean them out with an airline, re-tap the threads. Technologically speaking, apart from any metal fatigue that might happen, like when I had a bit of an overheat, then there shouldn't be any problem with these threads. Now, when I did have my overheat, I've run the engine for longer than a year since then, with absolutely no overheating problems, no loss of coolant, no undue signs of any problems. And when my car began to overheat, the engine was shut off absolutely promptly. We caught it. Actually, Natalie caught it before I did, whilst we were driving down the motorway from Ireland. So it was something that I think is obviously undesirable, but on the grand scheme of overheats on these BMW engines, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. In other words, I think the head is fine. The head looks like it hadn't had a problem. For the sake of what's this taking me 20 minutes to do this, and a tenner for the taps, I think they're worth their weight in gold. So we are about to plastic gauge the crank, and at the same time, I'm going to actually be testing the bolt stretch on the main cap bolts. I have read varying different things about main cap bolts needing to be replaced because of torque to yield. BMW does say they're supposed to be replaced. I've seen a number of people who don't replace them and a number of people who do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the M54 ones, which are the same bolts, to do the plastic gauge test, and I'm going to measure them before and after to see whether I get any stretch in them that's appreciable when I actually do this, because it'll be the second time they've been torqued. In essence, that'll be the same as what I then put into the engine. The M54 bolts will then be discarded, and I'll be, I think, reusing my M52 main cap bolts. So what I've got here at the moment, I'm just putting in half the shells of the King Racing bearings, bottom end bearings. I'm just about to put this thrust one in here. I'm going to torque down the middle journal here, so I'm not going to worry about the rest of the bearing shells here, and I'm only going to measure up 2 of these bolts because I only want to check one of these. I'm pretty sure they're going to be well within the specs, so let's just check the bolts. The bolts I'm making at the moment, I'd say they're both 91.5mm. The plastic gauge spec says to rub a little bit of silicone grease on the bearing shell to help releasing the plastic gauge at the end of it, so I'm just going to do that now. There we go. The torque spec here is 20 Newton meters plus an angle of 70 degrees. Right, I think that's close enough. Oh my god.
What? What's happened?
As I removed the cap, obviously it gets pretty damn tight, so you kind of wiggle it left to right and up and down like so. As I got it free, it smashed free, slid off to the side. I have a brand new bearing with a huge scratch in it, and I think the bearings are fucked. So I think that's 160 quid's worth of bearings down the fucking pan. All for the sake of testing something that I don't think even had to be tested in the first place. What a fucking waste of time. I reckon that we are looking at somewhere in between the 0.038 and the 0.050. It's way bigger than the 0.050 and a little tiny bit smaller than the 0.038. So I'm really happy that the plastic gauge is fine. I thought it would be fine. And now I really fucking wished I hadn't bothered. Bolts measure up exactly the same as they did previously, 91.5mm. Been no stretch on that, so I could reuse them, but it's irrelevant now. So we're now back here on day 4 of the engine rebuild. At the end of the last video you saw that I made a huge mistake and I knackered a crank bearing. I've since bought a whole new box of crank bearings. I'm not going to accept the fact that I could maybe have got away with a damaged bearing, although it really hurt paying the price. That's the price you got to pay for stupidity. So we're now back here. I've got the crank below me that's going to come back out again. I'm not going to plastic gauge this time because the tolerance of the plastic gauge, I went home and checked, and it was bang in the middle of the tolerance level as close as I could see. So I'm pretty happy that everything is fine with those bearings. I'm going to pull the crank out. I'm going to take all the shells out that are in there already. I'm going to put them back in a box. Maybe someone out there in YouTube land or in World eBay might want to buy them if they've done the same thing with a set of bearings and they've got a different one that they've knackered. Hopefully I can recoup some money for it, but hey ho. Then we're going to put the crank in. I'm going to tighten it all up. I'm going to start putting the pistons in and we're going to build this engine. So I made 2 mistakes when I did what I did the other day. As if you can look at this journal here where I've got my finger, this is when I was plastic gauging. I should have rotated the crank so that this part of the crank was down, out the way of the bearing. That was my first big stupid error. Then it would have made the chance of me hitting that far less. I also should have tapped the cap gently to try and wiggle it slower off and then got it loose before I actually lifted the cap off. You live and you learn. These are mistakes which I've made and I can't go back on now. It is what it is, man. I've learnt my lesson. I'm going to take the utmost care putting this in now, get it buttoned up, get the pistons in, and then I can call the bottom end done pretty much.